Right now, there is a heavy police presence outside Delaney Hall in Newark, New Jersey, although, unlike in some recent days, the situation is calm. Last night, protesters and state police once again clashed outside the detention center, arresting people after the mayor imposed a 9 p.m. curfew for the city. This is how New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill described the situation to my colleague, Reverend Al Sharpton, yesterday.
More and more people came to protest, and ICE started going into the crowds, using batons against people, beating people who were on the ground. The situation became more and more dangerous, and then ICE was surging personnel in. And I don't really have to tell your viewers why that would be a red line. We do not want to give ICE any excuse to get on the streets of New Jersey. We've seen how badly they do things in other states, up to and including killing American citizens.
Meanwhile, the message from DHS is order will prevail. MS Now's Josh Einiger is on the ground in Newark for us. Also here with me is Paola Ramos, journalist, author, and MS Now contributor. So, Josh, how are things looking there?
Traffic behind me because we're on a very industrial stretch here in the city of Newark. And the street in front of Delaney Hall, which is sort of behind me, is blocked by barricades set up by the governor's state police, by the New Jersey State Police. You know, that curfew that Newark Mayor Ras Baraka put into effect last night at 9 o'clock for the foreseeable future, they said, it involved the block behind me and moving those barricades, which, by the way, were not taken down this morning when that curfew officially came to an end. So I think the question and the hope, Chris, is that because you really, at this point, can't get to that facility if you're not visiting someone who's currently being detained there, the hope is that the protesters won't be able to get there and they will avoid the situation that they've had for the last couple of days as the New Jersey State Police have tried to come in and take control. You know, they're in a very difficult situation. You heard the governor there, Chris, talk about the desire to keep ICE from interacting with the protesters because that's what has happened across the country that has led to more and more federal resources and more kinetic confrontations. But of course, that led to confrontations separately with the state police. Of course, like I said, they're hoping that things are going to die down tonight. Right now, just a very small number of people holding signs in protest of the ICE facility here about a half mile behind me, but nothing remotely resembling what we've seen the last couple of days. Chris.
Josh Einiger, thank you for that. Paula, in a new interview in New York Magazine, New Jersey Senator Andy Kim says he spoke to a number of people. A pregnant woman inside Delaney who asked him if she needs to be prepared to have her baby there. He met an 18-year-old high school senior who said he just wants to go to prom and graduate. And a stage 3 lung cancer patient who wants to go back home but is, quote, stuck. Has the administration just made the calculation that whatever damage the immigration crackdown has had is baked in? So these kinds of stories simply speak to Democrats? I don't know. What do you see happening?
Chris, remember that at the end of the day, for them, this isn't political. No, there's a mission behind it. And the mission for the Trump administration is to ensure that the conditions inside these detention centers and outside are so unbearable, so inhumane that eventually it forces migrants to self-deport. Now, that's what Stephen Miller has been dreaming of for decades at this point. And so we're seeing it. I think Delaney Hall sort of opens up and exposes us to some of those realities. Now, in the words of these migrants, they're facing psychological and physical torture. That's what they said in the open letters. As you said, they're cancer patients that do not have access to proper medical care. They also don't have access to proper legal representation. The idea is for them to eventually leave. And unfortunately, Chris, that's exactly what the numbers show. Under this administration, voluntary departures have completely skyrocketed. To give you just a quick example, under Trump, there's been at least 90,000 cases of voluntary departures. For context, under Biden's last 16 months, that was 7 times more what we're seeing now than back then. And so the bigger story, though, Chris, is that Delaney, unfortunately, is part of a larger story. Now, let's remember that there's over 200 detention centers. Many of them, like you and I have spoken, are privately owned. There's over 50 people that have died under this administration. And so the one good thing, Chris, is that at least immigrants, both inside and out, are exposing Americans to a reality, which is what this government is capable of. And that's why people are protesting.
Well, to your point, Paula, Newark isn't the only place with protests at ICE facilities. In Albany, New York, demonstrations erupted after a father and his 4-year-old daughter were detained when he was taking her to school. They reportedly are being sent to Venezuela with DHS messaging what you just said. People should self-deport. Now, Albany's mayor wrote, among other things, no child in our community should have to experience this type of trauma. I think it's important to remind folks, what have you seen with the ongoing impact of situations like this on not just kids, but also the communities that they live in?
I mean, it's a crippling and paralyzing fear. Remember that even if you leave these detention centers, you then are shadowed with the trauma, that comes with you when you then go home and you're too scared to leave your home. You're too scared to go to church. You're too scared to go get groceries. That is a reality. And even someone like Liam Conejo Ramos, remember, he may be still in the United States, but there's a deportation order that's overshadowing them. And so I think if you take a step back, though, Chris, I think for some reason, many of us fell into the illusion that when Noam left and when Bovino left, that perhaps we would see an ICE that was quieter, or softer. But that's not true. And the only thing that has remained true is that the same fear and anxiety has been brewing from Minneapolis to LA to what we're seeing right now in the state of New York. And on the one hand, you have these ICE officers, and we're seeing it in Delaney every single day, that continue to view immigrants as criminals, protesters as rioters. And you have a White House that literally just last week, Chris, was comparing immigrants to aliens. Now you have a Secretary of Homeland Security that was essentially saying in public that these Delaney migrants, and if they wanted to eat real food, they should go back to their countries. And so on the other hand, Chris, that's why we're seeing the clash that we're seeing, because there is an American electorate that is thinking of the pain that these migrants are going through every single day, and that is out there trying to fight for their rights. And the interesting thing as we're headed to the midterm elections is that suddenly the United States, that was so allergic to the idea of abolishing ICE, is now somehow comfortable with that idea. And so there's this overshadowing question, to your point of what happens to these families, that I think haunts us all the time, which is, if we are in fact or not a country of immigrants, and if we are, how far are people willing to go to defend that? And that question we still cannot answer.